So Police Scotland have confirmed they've now received hate crime complaints from members of the public during yesterday's football match between Rangers and Celtic.
So those TV viewers were apparently offended by some of the football chants.
They've never been to a football match before. This, combined with the number of complaints since this legislation came into force last week, has now reached 10,000. I think it's making Scotland a laughingstock.
Well, it's certainly going to be making the police very busy. Well, joining us now from Benchmark Advocates Scotland is Thomas Leonard Ross. Good morning, Thomas. Thank you so much, KC. Thank you for joining us. First of all, what do you make of this legislation anyway? This idea that you could be reported to the police for stirring up hate just by words that you might use against particular characteristics?
I've never heard as much rubbish talked about any legislation in 40 years in the business. I mean, there's been some gross exaggerations of its effect, and almost all of it was already law in Scotland, and actually the new bit simply extended the offence of stirring up racial hatred to a number of other protected categories. And what's bad about it really is it's so complicated that it's impossible to understand it. And my prediction is that nobody will ever be prosecuted under it.
Isn't this the new section, though, Thomas, the encouragement, perhaps it's the marketing campaign that's come with it from the Scottish government, the idea that you should be encouraged to snitch on people that you hear talking in this way and having these drop-in centres where you can report a alleged crime of language?
Yeah, that's nothing to do with the Act. I mean, this is a response to the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, where it was suggested that police forces in the UK should record hate crime. So this has been going on in Scotland for years. It's nothing to do with the new legislation.
Why do you think people have reacted in this way then, Thomas? Because 10,000 complaints already is extraordinary. And I can't believe all of these people are just doing it to embarrass the SNP government.
Well, I mean, they're incredibly unpopular. The SNP government are incredibly unpopular at the moment and widely believed to be focusing on the wrong issues. And, you know, there's quite a hard core of people who support independence, who seem to be prepared to excuse them more or less anything. And then there's the majority who are looking forward to the time when they're no longer in a position to pass this sort of legislation. So undoubtedly, amongst that group, it's been weaponised, the legislation's been weaponised, and people who oppose the SNP, which seems to be the majority, see this as an opportunity to show how hopeless they are, essentially, and, you know, are dining out on it. So there's a lot of that. And in addition, you know, there's the J.K. Rowling issue, which has led to a lot of people piling on one side or the other. So, no,
what about the football match yesterday, Thomas? The football match, Celtic and Rangers, it's a traditional grudge match. There's often sectarian abuse. Now there's been hundreds of complaints about that.
Well, I mean, that was predictable. I don't think that, actually, reading between the lines, I don't think there has been anywhere near as many as people were predicting, to be honest. And it may be because of the way the match went. You know, Celtic scored very, very early, which dampened the spirits of the crowd a wee bit. And, you know, for 45 minutes, the Rangers team didn't turn up. So, I mean, it might be different when there's a proper match, when both sides are... I mean, there were no Celtic fans there yesterday also. It was all Rangers fans. So maybe the test will be next season when the fans are all in the stadium together.
It took 3 years to debate this legislation, didn't it, Thomas? It started in 2021. Obviously, there might have been some disruption maybe in that year because of pandemic restrictions, etc. But it clearly is a serious piece of legislation in terms of the SNP, because they debated for a very long time about the phraseology of it.
It's actually stranger than you say. The debate was finished by 2021. The legislation was really complete in 2021, and it then took them 3 years to bring it in. And I think the delay was the police were saying, well, we don't really understand this. There's going to have to be training and education within the police force. And they were encouraged to push back the date in which the Act came into force. But I'm not sure we're any further forward. I mean, the police have now been inundated with complaints. Police are complaining that they weren't properly trained, they weren't properly ready for it. So there's no doubt the whole thing actually appears like a complete mess. But for the lawyers, and I'm sure it only will be the lawyers who actually sit down and read the legislation, it's not as big a change to the existing law as people are making out.
OK, all right, well, that's reassuring in a way. Thomas Leonard Ross KC there from Benchmark Advocates Scotland.